time the race gets closer, then their ratings go up because all of us are like, ooh, it's getting closer. Even though not a single one of us has voted, these polls mean nothing, and they shouldn't be determining anything. And the reason that I'm concerned about it is that until people think about the polls for the garbage they actually are, they believe them. So, I don't know who's ahead between Trump or Hillary. I actually think that Gary Johnson has a lot more support than we're being told.
It's been 115 years since investors had an opportunity like this. The energy of the future. Now Elon Musk and Frank Giustra are betting big on the rise of this energy source that will change the world. We are talking about the oil of the 21st century. Learn more at crushthestreet.com/charge.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. We've got a returning guest today, Jennifer Briney of the Congressional Dish podcast. And as you all remember from prior interviews, she's someone who follows the bills that are being passed in Congress and what is really being passed, because she digs in them deep. And she keeps a close eye on what is going on, while the rest of us might otherwise let these things slip through, as much of it already does. And she uncovers many shady practices, like the bills that are being passed right before holidays or weekends, and just all the deep agendas that are being stuffed into these things. And you know what? A lot of fraud is being taken place. And we're going to get into some of this fraud by focusing on the election here upcoming in November. So Jennifer Briney, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Jen, in past interviews, we've talked about how the government stuffs all this information into bills and hides them and attempts to slip them through on a holiday, right before a holiday on a Friday when it's late, and nobody has time to review the content. And interestingly enough, James Comey, the FBI director, released the investigation of the Clinton email scandal on the Friday right before July 4th. And this seems so eerily similar to what we've seen with these bills. Were there any red flags regarding this that you saw regarding Clinton and this email scandal?
Well, I mean, that's definitely a strategy that I think everyone in Washington has figured out, that if you have something that you don't really want the public paying attention to, you release it at times when they're not paying attention, usually around holidays. So, you mentioned it with the government funding. And actually, just a quick tangent here, we can expect that to happen again. Right now, they're extending the government funding, and it looks like they're going to, once again, have the government run out of money between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so what they do is they fund the entire government all at once, and they stuff it full of goodies that we never know about because we're busy doing other things at that time of year. So that's a strategy. And you're right. I mean, Jim Comey, here's the interesting thing about Jim Comey is he became famous during the Bush administration. He was a Republican, and he was working for John Ashcroft at the time, the Deputy Attorney General. And when the warrantless wiretap program came up for reauthorization, it was unconstitutional. It's still unconstitutional. And at the time, John Ashcroft was sick. He was in the hospital. And so Jim Comey was the acting attorney general, and he refused to sign it. And so what Andy Card and Alberto Gonzalez did is they took those papers and tried to get John Ashcroft to sign it in the hospital, even though he wasn't the acting attorney general. And Jim Comey did something quite heroic in that he got in the car as fast as he could, got to the hospital, called anyone that he had to stop this from happening. And when he got there, there was this amazing scene where John Ashcroft sat up and said, "I'm not signing this for, da-da-da-da-da reasons. And by the way, I'm not the attorney general," and points to Jim Comey. So that's why Jim Comey was famous. So even though he's a Republican, Democrats like him because of that move where he stood up to the powerful people in the administration that appointed him. So fast forward now, Jim Comey remains a Republican, but he is appointed by the Obama administration, and Secretary Clinton was in the Obama administration. And so a lot of people are questioning that dynamic. Like, is he a party loyalist? But when it comes to Jim Comey, I really don't think so, because I've seen him now stand up to power when he needs to. And when you look at what he said that 4th of July, I think the timing was suspect because it does help Hillary. But at the same time, what they were announcing was that they aren't going to prosecute her because they can't prove that she risked classified information on purpose. And that's the important part. It's the on purpose part. She definitely risked classified information. There was definitely classified information.
So we just had a brief interruption there with our connection. We're going to get right into it. Jennifer, so when it comes to Hillary Clinton, you actually don't think that she should have been indicted based on what had happened then?
Well, I mean, where the prosecutors have to prove intent, I don't believe that she intended to risk classified information. I don't think that is the reason why she set up the private server. However, the FBI never looked into, or at least not yet, hasn't looked into her breaking of the Federal Records Act and the Freedom of Information Act. And I think that's where the real crime lies, is that, I believe, with every fiber of my being, is the reason she had that private server. In fact, she even alluded to that, where she was saying, I want to keep my private information private. But the problem is that the information about what she does as Secretary of State is not private, especially when it's mixing with her own personal foundation, as we now know what's happening on that private server. And so I think that's where the real crime is. And I also think that she may have lied. She definitely lied to American people, but she may have also lied to Congress. And so I don't think the investigations are done. But as far as the FBI not indicting for the classified information thing, I get it. I get that. It's the real scandal is the keeping stuff from the public. That's the reason for the server. And that's why I'm so upset about it.
Well, and to what extent then do you feel like she might be getting the protection from what we're calling the establishment here?
Well, I mean, like I said about Jim Comey, he's an interesting figure. He's already proven for himself not to be afraid to stand up to power when he needs to. So in this particular instance, actually, he did do a thorough investigation of the classified information. He hasn't yet been charged with looking into the violations of the Federal Records Act and Freedom of Information Act. So I kind of trust Jim Comey and always have. I think he's an interesting figure, being that, you know, if you want to look at it politically, just like that, he's a Republican going after Hillary Clinton. So if you look at it like if it was an ideological battle, he had every reason to go all out for her. But if they can't win the case, and so far I don't see anything that proves that she risked classified information on purpose, they're not going to go forward with it. So I understand his reasoning, and I don't think he was all that easy on her in his explanation of what happened in that press conference he did before the 4th of July, because he called her extremely careless. And he told us that they deleted emails that should not have been deleted in a way that could never be recovered. It expressed to me just how shady that behavior was and how unacceptable that behavior was. And I don't think the investigations are over. So I'm not really upset about it. I'm really not.
Well, and what about Bill Clinton's meeting with Loretta Lynch and the coincidence of it happening right before the announcement, and you know how they were just meeting to talk about their kids? Was that fishy at all to you?
Oh, of course. Of course. But I also don't think that it was one of those instances where I don't think there were bribes happening on the plane. I think it was probably because it was so close to the announcement. My guess, and obviously I know nothing official, but my guess is that Bill Clinton was being told ahead of time what the FBI was going to say. I don't think that there was any kind of coercion. Had that meeting taken place months before, I'd probably be more suspicious. But at that point, there were reports that were written on paper. It was done. I mean, there's too many people in the FBI that have been working on this to throw their work out the window in a matter of a couple of days.
Well, what about Hillary's health? And I want to get your thoughts on this. I watched the video of her fainting this week, and, they're trying to play it off like it's not that big of a deal. And, what was interesting to me was the way her Secret Service was when she fell over. They did not react to her like, oh my gosh, she just fell down. Yeah. It was everyone was just looking away, and it was as if they just wanted to play it off. as if it's no big deal. No one even really turned to her. They kind of just grabbed her arm and, almost they were going to walk a limp body into the vehicle, but except she, keeled over. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
The most fascinating thing about this to me is that I think if it was anybody else that passed out like that, because if you watch her feet in that video, they're completely limp. She can't stand. They're just gone, and they drag her into the van. If it was anyone else, I feel like the reaction would be, oh, my God, are you okay? I'm so worried. And people would send balloons and flowers, and she might even get a bump in the polls. With Hillary Clinton, because she lies so consistently, we're like, oh, see, she's sick. We knew it the whole time. So our reaction to all of it is what's fascinating me, because even in that instance, in that day, they lied to us. Because they brought her to Chelsea's apartment, then they staged this ridiculous thing where apparently all of the people that follow Hillary around everywhere are gone. And they just let some small child come and give her a hug. Yeah. And then she walks by herself into the van feeling great. Yeah. And then an hour later, she has pneumonia. So they're constantly lying to us. And it's gotten to the point where she is a human being. I'm concerned for her health, as I would be for any, grandmother-age person who is constantly running around the country and has health problems in the past. I hope she's okay, just as a person. But I think it speaks volumes as to how little we trust her, because we don't even we can't trust anything she says. I mean, in that one day, she lied to us saying, I'm feeling great, but oh, by the way, I have pneumonia.
And she gives the kid a hug.
And she gives the kid a hug. I don't know. Is pneumonia contagious?
Well, I mean, you could get it for different reasons, but it's I don't know. I'm not no doctor, but I wouldn't have given a kid a hug. It doesn't look very good.
I thought of that. It doesn't look good. You have this sick woman who's lying to us, telling us she's feeling great, hugging a child, and it was just so staged and gross, because I haven't seen a picture of Hillary Clinton without staff or Secret Service around her in I don't even know how long. So they staged this thing, and then the doctor comes out and says, oh, yeah, she's actually sick. So that's my bigger concern. I'm not so concerned about her health. I mean, if she's sick but the best candidate, I'd still vote for her. But the problem is she lies. She lies when she doesn't even have to lie. And that is my biggest concern. I mean, that's not my biggest concern with Hillary Clinton. My biggest concern is she's a warmonger. But when it comes to, trusting her, I don't. I just simply don't. She lies about things when she doesn't even have to. It's so unnecessary. So,
Jennifer, when it comes to Hillary versus Trump here in November, and I'm wondering, I mean, with the way the polls are, would you say that, what are your thoughts when it comes to the polls? Is Trump being underreported in terms of his popularity versus Hillary Clinton? Maybe let's say Bernie Sanders was. And to be fair to him, I think he got screwed with the way the polls were done. And I think the establishment helped Hillary Clinton to a very large degree in rigging the election. And I'm wondering if you would think that it's happening now with Hillary Clinton and Trump.
Oh, I think that the polls are absolute garbage. I don't think that they can be trusted at all. I mean, a great example of this is that they only poll, first of all, the polls that are being used right now to determine who gets to be in the debates are all big media polls. And there are no standards for who gets polled, what questions are asked, what order the names are put in. There's no requirement that Gary Johnson and Jill Stein be included in the poll. So that there's so many different ways that you can rig a poll, and the only reputable organization that I consider, I look at their polls and I think maybe these are true, are the Pew Research Center. But then if you look through how they actually do a poll, even those are garbage because, for instance, they poll only likely voters. So anyone who hasn't voted yet, hence the entire millennial generation, isn't included in the polls. We just don't count, quite literally. Also, there's a rule that says that you have to, if you're going to call someone's cell phone, you have to dial it manually. Where if you're calling a landline, you can robo-dial it. You can have a computer dial it. So landlines get a lot more calls than cell phones do. you can also choose who you call. So let's say you're a Fox News poll and you want to show that Trump is surging in the polls, then you just call Trump voters and you just don't call Hillary voters. So there's so many ways to skew a poll. And when it comes to trusting the big media polls, right now their ratings are depending on this being a close race. And so that's why I feel like it's all just a lie, because every time the race gets closer, then their ratings go up, because all of us are like, ooh, it's getting closer. Even though not a single one of us has voted, these polls mean nothing, and they shouldn't be determining anything. And the reason that I'm concerned about it is that until people think about the polls for the garbage they actually are, they believe them. So, I don't know who's ahead between Trump or Hillary. I actually think that Gary Johnson has a lot more support than we're being told. But the important part is that the American people are deciding whether or not they're going to vote based on these media-rigged polls, and that's my biggest concern. An American voter should never even pay attention to the polls. In fact, I think we are better off by not watching any coverage of this presidential election to be more informed, because right now it's just endless cycles of misinformation and fighting and lying, and it's not healthy and it's not needed. So yeah, I don't trust polls ever about anything. I really don't.
Well, then this would have to be a question regarding your gut instincts, but let's say Hillary Clinton does have a major issue. If you do think that Trump has a better chance of beating her in November, which I'm not saying you do, does Hillary have a better chance, or do the Democrats have a better chance of winning in November? Say if Hillary dies for some medical issue and they, have Joe Biden run as the candidate.
Oh God, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean,
does she have, I guess what I'm asking is, it goes back to what we were talking about before, and does she have too much baggage where people just don't trust her and they're better off voting for someone else who doesn't have as much baggage and, defaulting their support to someone, let's say, like Joe Biden?
Yes. Oh, definitely. Hillary has so much baggage, but so much of it is self-inflicted. So much of it is the pattern of lying, which you just can't make go away, and she's continuing to lie to us. And so I don't think that the Democrats could have picked a worse candidate. And then also, there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party. I mean, I'm not in the Democratic Party, but I believe strongly in not meddling in the affairs of other countries. I don't care if another country wants to do an economic system that is different from our own. Like, go ahead. If you don't want to sell your oil to the multinationals, okay, fine. But Hillary Clinton is someone who is very much for regime changing for basically big business. She voted yes on Iraq. She was instrumental in Libya. People in her administration were part of picking the new leadership of Ukraine. This is what she does. And so for those of us that were really upset at the Bush administration for Iraq, well, Hillary Clinton is the worst choice for us. So I think that for a lot of people, what you find in that dynamic is like, oh, well, I was not a George W. Bush. I can't vote for Clinton. Trump is Donald Trump. I'm not voting for him. And you're just sitting here going, there's no options for me in the big two parties, which is why, and in my experience with my own friends who don't have cable, don't watch the news, so many of them are voting for Gary Johnson. So many of them. In fact, old school Republicans in my family are now voting for Gary Johnson. It's for the first time in my lifetime, we all agree. We're all voting for the same guy for different reasons, but we're voting for the same guy, and the polls are not reflecting that. So it's going to be a fascinating year when we actually get to vote. I think a lot of professionals that are telling us what's going on in the world are going to be proven wrong in fascinating ways.
Jennifer, you actually did a podcast on a third-party candidate, and you actually suggested that they could potentially win. And this is actually something interesting, and it tips our hat to Gary Johnson here as a viable candidate, even though he's not getting the recognition and support that otherwise he should get by the media, by the polls, and different things like that. So what are your thoughts on this?
So I'm so glad you asked that, because I studied up on how the Electoral College actually works for my last episode. And it turns out that if no one gets, so the way it works in the Electoral College, you have to get 270 electors. You have to get over half of the electors in order to be nominated president. But if a third person comes in and denies the big two parties, both of them, getting to 270. So if, Hillary can win, technically get more votes and more electors, but not get to 270, then the House of Representatives picks our president. And what's fascinating is when the House of Representatives gets picked, they get to choose between the top 3 elector getters, not 2, 3, which means that if Gary Johnson can get even just a couple seats, if he can get enough electors to just play spoiler to Trump and Hillary, then this House of Representatives would be the one that would vote. Now, this is why it has to be Gary Johnson this year and not Jill Stein, because this House of Representatives is run by Republicans. And the House of Representatives would vote by state, and Republicans have a solid majority in 32 states. And so it's really a Republican pick. And so if it was Jill Stein, Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump is their obvious choice. He wins. However, if it's Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and Gary Johnson, well, we know that there's plenty of people in the Republican Party that just will not vote for Donald Trump. They don't like him. In fact, the Speaker of the House and Donald Trump are not good friends. And then there's also Democrats, seeing that dynamic, that I think would support Gary Johnson in that vote if they think that would prevent a President Trump, because Hillary wouldn't be an option. She just doesn't have the support available. So I do think that there would be Democrats that would join with the libertarian-leaning Republicans to vote for Gary Johnson, with Hillary and Trump being their options too. So there is a path for Gary Johnson. And what's scandalous / fascinating is he'd only have to get a couple states, or not even, one state, depending on how many electors it has, could make Gary Johnson the president. And so if you like that option, if you don't like Hillary or Trump, and especially if you like Gary Johnson more, vote for him. And this is a possible scenario based on the way our system works.
Well, you make an interesting point there, and something I've never considered. Although I tend to think it's going to be one of the two. And if it is one of the two, Jennifer, do you think, and this will be like my closing question for you, do you think Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump have enough people that hate them that they will likely be assassinated?
Oh, sweet baby Jesus, that's quite a question. No. I mean, at the end of the day, Donald Trump is an interesting guy. So here are my silver linings if they become president. If Donald Trump's the new president, my silver lining is he's going to tell us things that he's not supposed to. He has loose lips, and I think that will be fascinating for a lot of us. And there's certain things, like with the international trade negotiations for those free trade agreements, I would love for Donald Trump to just tell us what goes on. And there's things that I'm sure that are classified that he might be willing to make unclassified. So there's a wild card aspect to Donald Trump that I could be interested in. And then if Hillary becomes the president, she might be convinced to legalize marijuana. I don't think she's against it. I do think some social issues. I don't think that she'll veto any bills that get passed that make our social freedoms a little bit better. But Hillary Clinton, I do fear her as commander-in-chief, and I don't know. She's really concerning to me. She really is. But at the same time, we made it through the Bush years. We made it through the Obama years. We'll make it through no matter what. We'll find a way. So I don't lose any sleep over any of this, but now that I see a path where something better could happen, which for me is a none of the above for both of them, I'm feeling better about this election than I have in a long time. And I just wish that the media would tell us how the Electoral College actually works past the election night, because the scenario that I described to you, that is so possible that it just gives me hope for days. That's what I'm kind of holding on to right now.
Jennifer, I was talking to someone about this week, and it's amazing how the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, they're just private organizations that have become so powerful, where they basically shape the politics in the direction of the country. We could start our own party, and if it got big enough and enough funding and enough power, we can use it to put people into office. And people have just gotten used to Republicans and Democrats as if they're an extension of the government, which they're really not. They're their own organizations. And I guess that's the frustrating part for someone like me who just feels like, we're just stuck with very, very limited options. And someone like Gary Johnson would be ideal. I also like Ron Paul, back in prior elections. But it doesn't seem like we're going that way. So just some closing thoughts here, and please share some information for the audience regarding the congressional dish and any new updates since we last spoke.
Well, right now what I'm trying to do is just look at the most important things that have happened in this Congress before we vote. So last year when like I told you with the government funding, they did a 2,000-page bill filled with all kinds of stuff between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And in the same exact week, they passed a major transportation funding law and they overhauled our education policy all in 1 week. So we're talking like at least 3,000 pages worth of legislation. And I'm still working my way through it. So between now and the election, I will be doing an episode on the education policy. I've done the other two already. And then I have a really interesting interview with the chief of staff for a Republican congressman who's going to tell us, how things actually run up there. It's a little disturbing, but I think we need to know. And yeah, we're voting in just, I have 3 more episodes until we vote. So the most important thing going on in Congress right now is that they're just going to extend the government funding until December. They're going to set up another one of those situations where when we're not paying attention, they're going to fund the government. And I think it's also important to remember that it was one of these it was in the same time during the lame duck session of Congress in 2012 that they passed that thing as an attachment to the NDAA that allows indefinite detention of anyone, really. So I find that these government funding laws, the bills, the must-sign bills that happen in lame duck Congresses are the most concerning. So if there's ever a time that we need to pay a ton of attention to Congress, it's actually after the election. It's between the election and the inauguration. So that's something to look forward to, I guess, if you could put it like that. But we're pretty safe for now. And until then, I would consider voting for Gary Johnson. I mean, I don't really care how people vote because, like you said, I think we're more likely to end up with Trump or Hillary, who are both bad options. But if you're on the fence, like I said, there is a way for Gary Johnson to be our next president, and he's a fascinating figure. He's someone where a lot of people ideologically will find a lot of things they don't like about him, but will also find a lot of things they do. I call him the ultimate compromise candidate. So he's interesting. He's worth looking into, and especially if they exclude him from the debate, it would be really cool to see the millennial generation in particular show up in mass and just show the establishment that we're tired of the Republicans and Democrats controlling the whole thing.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that, Jennifer. Jennifer Briney, everyone, of the Congressional Dish podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much. It was fun.